So we talk about this high and low context communication coined by the popularist anthropologist Edward Hall. And what Hall postulated is that all of us communicate, but what is intended by what we're communicating. So I say the words, "How are you?" and you say to me, "Fine." What does that mean in white suburban North America? Pretty much nothing. It's a vehicle by which we communicate, "You're alive, I'm alive, okay." And we move on from there. As a matter of fact, if someone says, "I'm not fine, in fact, I'm quite horrible," you usually say, "Well, all I wanted to know is whether you're fine or not. I don't need any more details." But the reality is, whenever we talk, we have words that we use, but we also rely on what we know about each other when we use those words. And that's the contexting part. So what Hall called high context communication is it relies, Calvin, I get back to you, I'm picking on you right now. You and I have a history with each other. It's a brief history, but we have a history with each other, so now we have a commonality. And all I have to do is say card game, and you're reminded of the simulation we played in the card game, and it brings back a wash of emotions to you, whereas anybody who didn't play that card game has no idea what I'm talking about. We talk about inside jokes in the US. Inside jokes are shared because two people share a common context. In many parts of the world, communication is intended to travel this way, rather than simply by the words themselves. So the story is told, and I may have told this story in the book, of the Japanese man who comes home from work and he sees that the flowers are misplaced in the vase just inside the doorway. Then he notices that the picture is not aligned quite right, and he knows his wife is upset. He doesn't know what it is. And those of you who are Americans might be saying, well, an American man won't even know that there's a vase and won't even realize that there's a picture, and perhaps that the wall's been repainted or anything like this. Well, the reality is the Japanese man sees these and he knows his wife is upset, but he doesn't know what yet. So how does he handle it? If he's an American, he goes to his wife and said, "Honey, what's wrong?" But he's Japanese. To ask her that is too direct of a question. So instead he listens to her. And over the course of the evening, she mentions his mother far more often than she normally would. Not disparaging, not negative. She just mentions her. And he realizes the problem is with his mother. So, as they go to bed, he says, "You know, I haven't seen my mother in a while. Perhaps I will bring a gift to her tomorrow." And she says, "Oh, that would be good." And the problem is solved. It doesn't make sense to us, does it, as Americans? But when I told that story with a Japanese student in class, she wondered why I was telling the story because it was so normal. To her, it made perfect sense that you don't talk about it verbally, you communicate non-verbally. People pay attention not just to you saying the word fine, but you say it fine. That communicates something different, doesn't it? And high context communication says I pay attention less to the words in and of themselves and more to the context in which they're spoken and how they're spoken. The perfect example of low context communication is computer programming. Because the stupid computer does exactly what you tell it to do, whether or not that's what you wanted it to do. Oh, delete all those files? Sure. But I didn't mean that. So you told me to do it. And that's low context communication. In the US, courts of law are low context settings. A very good defense lawyer knows how to manipulate context in such a way that they can cast doubt on whether their client is guilty or not. And if you think back on the dramas you've seen related to US courts of law, often a question is asked, just say yes or no. And you want to say yes, but, or you want to say no, but the lawyer won't allow that, just yes or no. Because they want to decontext your answer and put it in a space that casts doubt on the guilt, if you're a defense lawyer, of your client. And in the US, we value contracts where the legalese is written out. What happens if you sign a contract and you signed on to do something you didn't know you were signing to do? In the US, it doesn't matter. You're still to be held to it because you are responsible before signing the contract to make sure you understand it completely. But see, in many parts of the world, that's not the framework of communication. I've given you the Japanese example already. Middle context, France is related as a middle context country. In French courts of law, they often will call in character witnesses. We'll say who this person is, how they know them, how long they've known them, and in what ways this helps them understand the case. We decontext cases. French laws context cases, and French courts do. So when we look at this illustration, a high context setting, nonverbal skills are appreciated. The ability to convey meaning through facial expressions, through body posture, through time of day when you deliver something. Think of the Japanese tea ceremony, which is not filled with words. It's filled with ritual actions. Your expression, verbal expression, is limited. It doesn't mean you have to limit it, but it doesn't add things to the setting. The child needs all the words. The adult does not. The adult needs all the accompaniment of the words. It's very slow to change. And you'll notice this, every relationship that you have, often, in our culture at least, an individualistic culture, starts out very low context, but as time goes by, you move into a higher context relationship. My wife and I had 30 years of marriage that we celebrated this spring. Well, after 30 years, we understand each other quite well. We can look at each other and with a glance know what's going on. And that can be good and that can be bad. She constantly tells me I'd be a horrible poker player if I were to play because she can always tell when I'm bluffing. Or she can always tell when I've got a good hand whenever we're playing a card game or something like that. And it's simple for her because she knows me well enough to read the high context. It doesn't matter what I say at that point in time. She's read my facial expression. She says I get a nervous twitch on my face that she can see, and it gives the game up. But it's long to learn this because it's not just the words. And we don't usually talk about, well, your eyebrow raised in that way you do. Occasionally, my wife will rightly say to me, I'm not your student. Stop talking like a teacher to me. Because I'm in teaching mode as I am right now. I'm teaching to you rather than just talking with you. And that makes her angry. And so you've got to stop talking to me that way. So it took my kids, before I really believed it, to say, yeah, Dad, you're in teacher mode right now. But since they're kids, you're allowed to be in teacher mode with your kids. But once they got to be teenagers, I realized, I do have that mode, don't I? I was pretty well blind to it. It's very fast to use once you learn it. Just rolling the eyeballs conveys an awful lot. And the information is found in the context. Low context communication, on the other hand, values verbal skills. Classroom settings typically are low context settings, but I'm watching all of you as students. And I'm observing your reaction to me. And it makes me moderate or change what I'm saying or about to say, or I might need to explain another example. If I see a look of confusion, I might add an illustration to it. If I see you're engaged, I'm encouraged to keep on going on. So what I'm doing right now is very low context, but the live audience that I'm watching is higher in context because we're giving feedback to each other on what we're saying, what's going on. The ability to express yourself verbally is very important in low context settings. It's easy to change because all you have to do is change words. Words are easier to change than gestures are. A lot easier to change. Think of the new words we add to our vocabulary. When my wife started using the word Google as a verb, I knew the world had changed. Because she is as computer phobic as I am computer holic, and she has become a search engine type of guru over the last several years. But the fact that she started talking about Googling something showed me, okay, this has changed. All it was adding a word. It's quick to learn, relatively speaking. Think of this. If you learn the language of a country, you learn Thai, that's a lot easier to learn than the high context communication that takes place in Thailand. And that takes decades for people to master. When you're in Japan, you might feel tempted to bow and to see how well you can imitate Japanese protocol, but you're not paying attention to the quarter-inch deeper bow that you are receiving because of your respective position as a teacher. Because you're not trained to do that. You're just trained to bow. You're not even trained to bow. You don't understand how the whole system works, and that just takes longer to learn.